you're about to listen to is what we like to call a legacy episode. In 2016 and 2017, I embarked on a very special project, the Holistic Fertility and Wellness Podcast. I had the pleasure of interviewing experts and friends from around the world, as well as recording some of my own thoughts in solo episodes. These re-released legacy episodes are just a few of my favorite from that time. Although some of my thoughts and ideas have changed since that time, I think much of what you'll hear is still quite valuable. New episodes of Motherhood in America will be available soon, so keep an eye out. But for now, enjoy this special legacy episode. This podcast is for informational purposes only and not meant to provide medical or mental health advice and does not replace personalized care by your provider. Hello. I didn't have a chance to do the intro for our guest today, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now and tell you about a couple of other things that I really want you to know about. So our guest today is Leah Vis, and Leah is a mother of 4 children, a homeschooler, children's book author, and a photographer. About 6 years ago, Leah experienced 3 consecutive miscarriages. After having to tell her 2 children at the time about one of the miscarriages, she decided to write a children's book to help other families understand miscarriage and process it with hope. This book is called Our Heaven Baby. This book tells the personal story of her family as they experienced miscarriage and also the hope of heaven. Leah is also the founder of the publishing company 3 Horse Publishing, which champions books that bring joy, hope, and wonder to children and families. Now, friends, Leah is one of my dearest friends, and she was actually the first interview I did on the podcast. If you want to hear her full story, you can go all the way back to episode number 1, and you can hear her whole story of the 3 consecutive miscarriages. But what I wanted to point out before I get started on this interview is that one of the main reasons we did this interview was because she has this book out now called Our Heaven Baby, which I just mentioned. For whatever reason, we did not really get around to talking about it, and I realized as I went back to edit the interview that we were a bit unclear when we start talking about the book, but we made it sound as if you all already knew what we were talking about. When if I wasn't recording this right now, you wouldn't have any idea what we were talking about. And the only thing I can chalk it up to is that I had several interruptions during the recording of this interview, and you probably won't catch them on the recording because I edited, but I think that got me off track with the questions that I planned to ask and making sure that we covered the information about this book. But you guys, this book is absolutely beautiful. It is, the illustrations are gorgeous. The book is told from the perspective of her son, Abel, and it goes through the process of him learning that he was going to have a baby brother and how excited he was, and then learning that the baby died, and then parents telling him about how the baby is now in heaven, and why don't we dream about what heaven's going to be like and what it'll be like when we get to see our baby there. So it's a really, really incredible book, and she's got this Kickstarter going on right now. If you're listening to this in real time, then there's 9 days left in the Kickstarter, so head on over to the link in the show notes so that you can support that Kickstarter. And if you're not listening to this in real time, then you guys, I am certain you're going to hear about this book again, that you're going to see it in other places. Maybe by the time you hear this, it's available on Amazon or at your local bookstore. That's what we're really hoping for. And so regardless, whether you're able to support the Kickstarter or not, this message that she has is so important. And we dive into some really good stuff on this interview about talking to your kids about miscarriage. And a lot of it applies to just loss in general. What it's like to talk to your kids about the loss that we experience in life all the time. So I hope that clears things up a bit when you're listening to the interview, and now I will end this and let you hear what we had to say. Leah, welcome back to the show.
Hi.
I'm so glad to have you. I'm sure that, I will have shared this in the intro by now, but I'll say it again. I am so excited to welcome my friend Leah back to the show. She was the person I interviewed for my very first podcast episode, and she shared her incredible story. And so it's just really fantastic to have her back to talk about what has really transpired in her life since then. So Leah, I would love if we could just get started by briefly having you share your story and sort of how that brought you to a place of writing this book.
Yeah. So, I'll try to stay brief since I have the rest of my story in your other podcast. But,
right.
So right now we have 4 children. We had our story is that we had 2 children, 2 years apart, and then we wanted to try again. And so we started trying and got pregnant again pretty easily. And that started the journey into miscarriage. And we had 3 miscarriages in a row, which was a major shock to us because we had already had 2 kids with no problems at all. So that was crazy, totally unexpected. And so we had the 3 miscarriages. We had it at 12 weeks, 8 weeks, and then 16 weeks. And then after the 16-week pregnancy is when I just got this fire in me, and I told myself and God, I'm going to get pregnant again. What do I need to do to get pregnant? And then just went on a journey toward that and ended up getting pregnant and having 2 more babies, which we're super thankful for all of them. But that's the overview of our kids and miscarriages and more kids. And then how that brought me to the book is, so after, our 12-week and 8-week pregnancies that we lost, we didn't tell the kids about because, I'm kind of on the plan of I don't tell very many people until 12 weeks anyways. Mm-hmm. And definitely I just wasn't going to tell the kids until 12 weeks. That just seemed safer to me. Even though I had never had miscarriages before at that point, I still just didn't.
Sure.
So the only one they knew about was the 16-week pregnancy. And the reason we did feel safe to tell them is because we had gone in already at 12 weeks and heard a heartbeat, and they got to be there, and we told them we're having a baby. And so we just felt good. Once you get to 12 weeks and hear the heartbeat, you're safe. But we still ended up losing the baby. So that's the one that we told them about. And we told them about the pregnancy, and so then we also had to tell them about the miscarriage. What do you think heaven's going to be like? And so the rest of the book is my son and daughter dreaming about what heaven will be like and all their childlike wonder, all the fun things, like how, I didn't put the whole reading lesson thing in there, but that's totally a thing that a kid would think, we don't have to have reading lessons anymore.
Right.
It's from their heart. So yeah, that's the book and our story. And I was so excited. That book, the Heaven is for Real book, was such a blessing to us to help us think about the next thing. The baby died, but what's next? The next thing is that the baby's in heaven, and that's really hopeful. And I know not everyone is the same, but I definitely crave hope when I'm in that kind of a place, a place of sadness and anger. I'm literally frantically searching for hope, and so that helped me so much, and it definitely helped the kids too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a beautiful perspective to have it from your son's view of things. And I think that that even more will help children process rather than an adult telling them things. Like our grown-up way of looking at stuff a lot of times is too complicated, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's way too complicated. And that's why, I mean, like I said, I think every child is different, but I also think that this could be more similar than we might have guessed, that kids don't automatically go deep. Mm-hmm. And my kids, I have deep kids. Like, they think deeply about a lot of things. But I mean, at the time when we shared this, my son was 5 and my daughter was 3. So they were really young still. And I think it would be different, a little bit different when they're older. But still, I mean, I was older, you know, I was a grown up when I was going through this grief, and it still helped me to redirect my heart toward hope. So I don't really think it matters what age. I think that it might vary in how they process it, but I don't think it will ever hurt to think about hope, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So then, Leah, what do you think are some really important things for us to consider when we're, I mean, obviously we've talked about keeping things simple, not overcomplicating, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But, you know, what are some general ideas of things to keep in mind when we are helping kids to understand miscarriage and pregnancy loss?
Yeah, I think that if you think about pregnancy, like the minute you get pregnant, you're so excited and bonded to that baby, you know, and that just grows and grows and grows, right? Mm-hmm. Well, kids are not as bonded to a baby in our belly as we are, like, by far. And so even pregnancy alone, I think, is hard for kids to wrap their minds around. Like, yeah, we can tell them over and over, there's a baby growing, even though you know, like, you can't see it, you can't hear it, like, there's a baby in there. And you almost have to, like, tell them over and over, because it's really difficult. I mean, I think it's even hard for us as grown-ups to understand sometimes that, wait, there really is a baby in there.
Right, that's true. It really is. It's such. Yeah. It still seems like such a strange thing. So,
seriously,
yeah.
Every time I see someone have a baby, I still have that shock of, like, I can't believe that was in there. Like, it's amazing. So even more so with kids. And so because of that, I don't think they're as deeply affected as we are if we lose the baby. I knew that I would be struggling so much more than my kids would. And so I chose not to bring them into my grief. But if they saw me crying and asked what was wrong, I wouldn't hide it. I would be honest. I would say, I'm sad about the baby dying. But then I would leave it at that, unless they asked more. And if they asked more, I would share more. But I wasn't hiding it, but I wasn't purposefully sharing my grief either. You know, so maybe they will have their own kind of struggle. And if they do, then it's important to make room for that and help them talk about it. But I didn't want to give them my own struggle.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like that's how it is with so many hard things that we're going to have to talk to our kids about. You know, over the last few years, my kids have come up with questions that I don't think I even ever thought about as a kid. And they're really, really intense, hard things. And they have these questions, and they're usually satisfied with a straightforward answer, and they don't really dwell on it or need to talk much more. So I think it's wise to answer hard questions or present hard situations simply, and then just dig in with them as their questions dig in, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really good to keep things sort of open to continual discussion, just like anything that is, you know, a big important thing with our kids. If they know that they can come to us to ask the questions later, rather than it being like a sit down, discuss, we're going to talk about this right now, and that's the only time we're going to talk about it, then, you know, when that's open, then they have that freedom, and you can explain stuff when it comes up without having to worry about trying to cover all the bases in this one talk, and which could be completely overwhelming for your kids.
Totally. And often sometimes that they don't even need that or want that, you know, like it's kind of, I always think about it. This is a totally different subject, but it's intense and not fun to talk about. I always think about it when you're having to explain sex to your kids for the first time. And it's like, they don't want to hear all the details.
Right.
Their minds have not gone anywhere near all the details, but they do have this one question, and you can answer that one question, and that's usually all they want and all they need. But it's like, if they asked me that one question and I was like, all right, here we go. And I like told them everything that they would ever need to know in life, like they would be so traumatized probably.
Right.
You know, like they just don't need that. And I feel like that's how it is with so many hard things. And we just answer them with what they need and at that time, and that's it. And then even like with the miscarriage, you know, we told them what happened, and we didn't just say the baby died and, you know, is in heaven with Jesus, and leave it there. Like we could have, I guess, but then we redirected it toward hope. So I didn't want to go like deeper into like, what does that mean for our sadness, and what does that mean? Like, are you really sad? You know, I didn't want to create things like that for them, but I thought it was totally okay to create or to bring in the hope thing, because that's what I would have wanted. I mean, that's what I want when I do struggle. I want people to say, you know, to be there with me, but also give me hope. So I think that really did help the kids a lot. And then even now, I mean, for years after we lost the baby, my daughter, every person she met, if we were meeting like a new person, she was always telling them about our babies in heaven. And it was just like, la-di-da, like, we have babies in heaven. Like, it wasn't sad. She didn't say, oh yeah, we have this many kids and we also have 3 babies in heaven. But it was like totally happy. Like, hey, you got to know this. This is really exciting. We have 3 babies in heaven. And so I feel like because of the hope that filled that situation when we told them, it remained a really good experience for them, so that they could look back on that and just think, wow, we have siblings in heaven. And so it just remained positive for them.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction. I think bringing it back to what you even started with, like, kids are not as bonded to the baby as you are. And so it can be just an okay sort of thing. Like, this is a thing that happened, and there's hard stuff. Like, obviously they notice mom and dad are sad, and that's a hard thing. And at the same time, we also have siblings in heaven. And so it's just life, right? Like, life has all of these different aspects. Nothing in life is just one thing or another. And it's sort of letting that be true with them.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
You know, I think that, like you said about the whole sex talk, for example, and it just being the truth about every hard thing, or every complicated thing, or, you know, big sort of concept we try and talk to our kids about, that it's so important to just give them straight answers. When a lot of confusion happens is when we deal with euphemisms and, you know, like saying that somebody passed away, like that whole concept is, I think, very confusing for kids, that, and that it's sort of like dealing with our discomfort when we say things like that, when the kids don't have that same kind of discomfort that we're experiencing.
Right. And if we start acting out of that discomfort and trying to gloss it over and that just makes things more confusing to them.
So yeah, this is such an important topic for us to discuss. And I think too, even to bring back to your entire story, that we're talking about secondary infertility here as well, where it's something that a lot of times is also not part of our typical discussion, is that a lot of times when we talk about infertility, it's with an assumption that people don't have any kids. And so having already had children is adds a different layer to some of the things that you dealt with and things you were going through.
Right. Yeah, in a lot of ways it was a different kind of confusion, because it felt really out of the blue, and then also really having to figure out how to bring the kids through it too.
Right. So thank you so much for that, Leah. Thank you for sharing that and sharing these important pieces of your story with us that we didn't get to talk about in the previous podcast, because it was really about some different things that we were talking about before. So this is such a crucial piece and such a gift, I think, that you're offering to other families who are going through this as well. So before we wrap up, do you have a parting piece of wisdom that you'd like to offer our listeners, something you really want to make sure they hang on to from this interview?
I think as we've been talking, and we're talking about sharing honestly with your kids, it reminds me of some parenting advice that I've gleaned from this pastor named Chris Salton, and he often talks about parenting, and that's not all he talks about, but I've definitely gained some stuff from him. And he says, you want to be your child's source of all information, and they're so curious, like they're going to find out answers somehow. And so if you don't share with them, they're going to figure it out through friends or making their own things up. But if we continue to stay honest with them and answer their questions, even though it's uncomfortable, and answer them as if we're not uncomfortable, then we're going to become their source of information, and they're going to come back to us every time something weird or hard or uncomfortable or scary comes up. They're going to know, oh, mom and dad will know the answer to this. And, rather than going to their friends, or we don't want them to go to outside sources, with the really important stuff. Yeah, definitely.
And that even if you don't have the answers, that you're not going to be, that you'll help them find them out, and that also that they won't be shamed for having hard questions. I think that's really key too.
Yeah, I think if we answer without really, even if we are uncomfortable, if we answer pretending that we're not uncomfortable and just matter-of-factly like, oh, here's the answer, like this makes me I'm totally comfortable answering this, then they're going to think all this stuff is normal, and that it's not weird to ask your parents this. It's not weird to have these feelings. It's, with everything, every big thing in life, they're just not, like you said, they're not going to have shame attached to it because we didn't act embarrassed when we answered it.
Yeah.
Or even like with miscarriage, we didn't act, even if we are burdened, if we don't put that on our answers, then they don't have to take on that burden that they didn't already have to.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just quickly talk about the book. What is the name of your book?
The name is Our Heaven Baby.
Okay, awesome. And you have a Kickstarter campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, right now we have a Kickstarter campaign going on, and this is to raise money to print the books, because we're printing a lot of them, because we're planning on sharing them as much as we can. So this is basically, if you contribute to the Kickstarter campaign, it's basically like pre-ordering a book. And so I would love it if anyone who's interested would join in on this campaign, because this is literally the way we're going to get it printed.
Yeah. And, this is not just for those who have or are going through this themselves, but also if you know somebody who has, if you've got, friends or family, this would be such a great gift for them. And honestly, to even just have one on hand, because this kind of stuff happens with families all the time. And so being able to have it for your own family or to give as a gift to somebody else is a really cool thing. So thank you so much for that. And Leah, where can we find you online?
I have my Instagram, which is Leah_Vis. So LEAH_Vis. And then that's book stuff, and also just life and family and homeschooling stuff too.
So I'll add that. I'll add your all your contact info into the show notes, as well as link up to that Kickstarter campaign. So anybody who would like to contribute to that, then you know exactly where to find it at the at our website. So Leah, thank you again so much for taking the time and for coming on here and sharing this really incredible book you have put together. I appreciate it so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.